A supercar for the PlayStation generation, Nissan's GT-R is astonishingly accessible and frighteningly quick. Finding something that's faster is hard enough at any price, but for the kind of money this car sells at, it's impossible. Tucked away amongst the cane fields of Hokkaido, Japan's North Island, is a test track that is itself a tiny piece of Germany. Signs point to Cologne, and there are perfect replicas of autobahn rest stops. The road surface is Germanic, and if you wait a while, you might hear the ballistic roar of a turbocharged Porsche 911 flying past at 3 miles a minute. Creating a supercar to beat Audi, Mercedes and, yes, Porsche requires nothing less than this kind of attention to detail. And the result is this, Nissan's astonishing GT-R. The Japanese brand has bought us Ferrari-baiting supercars before with GT-R badges, but they've also been called Skylines, the R32 of 1989, then the ones we saw in Britain, the R33, launched here in 1997, and the R34, which followed it in 1999. With these cars, Nissan was learning. With this R35, introduced here in 2009, the gloves are off. No more Skyline references to cheaper mass-market models, it's just GT-R, purpose-built for 200-mile-an-hour Porsche performance at a fraction of the price. Now this car really shouldn't work. It's too big, too heavy, and far too complex. Plus, of course, there's the vexing issue of paying supercar money for something with a Nissan badge. But it does. Oh, it does. First, the figures. 60 from rest is barbecued in 3.9 seconds. 100 miles an hour flashes by in 8.5 seconds. And if you have an airport runway on hand, you'll hit 193 miles an hour before the electronics cut in to prevent you reaching the magic 200 mile an hour mark. If you need a frame of reference, that's roughly the same as a Ferrari 458 Italia, a car that has 2 rather than 4 driven wheels and costs, wait for it, over £100,000 more. That gives you some idea of the scale of Nissan's achievement in creating this GT-R. Under the bonnet sits a thundering hand-built 478 brake horsepower twin-turbo V6 driving all 4 wheels via a twin-clutch 6-speed semi-automatic gearbox, which uses these leather-fringed steering wheel paddles for lightning-quick 0.2 second changes. Now, if you're an enthusiast, you'll be using these paddles all the time, but the transmission can also adapt itself to your mood via this dashboard-mounted toggle switch. Now, you can set it in snow or normal modes, but you can also set it to R for race mode. Now, race mode basically enables the engine to run right up to the limiter, and there are also race mode R settings for the suspension to firm it up and for the ESP to give you a bit more leeway with the stability control. If you leave it be, the transmission sends 97% of its power to the rear wheels, but within 1/10 of a second, all that can change. If you're cornering vigorously, up to 30% of torque can be directed frontwards, leaving just enough remaining to light up the rear wheels and slingshot you forward into the next bend. You can understand why this car embarrassed Porsche by lapping their own backyard, Germany's Nordschleife Nürburgring racetrack, faster than a 911 Turbo that cost nearly twice as much. Even when you're not on a racetrack, the whole experience is addictive in the extreme. And extreme is a word you keep using with reference to this car. Take the initially slightly baffling driver information system that offers no fewer than 11 different screens via which passengers can gauge either your bravery or your recklessness. It'd be foolhardy, suicidal to try and control this rocket ship while watching them yourself. You can measure your brake, throttle and steering input, check on the acceleration, cornering and G-forces pinning you into your sculpted sports seat, dial in to the front to rear torque split, monitor the operational state of the engine and transmission, assess your fuel usage, and of course record lap times. It all reminds you of a PlayStation. No coincidence, since Sony were involved in this GT-R's development. But at least this steering isn't games console-like. quick-witted and communicative, which is useful on twisties when you're away from this GT-R's natural habitat of fast-flowing roads. The brakes are suitably awesome too, stopping this 1,775 kilogram hot rod dead from 70 miles an hour in just 40.9 meters. The ride isn't as stiff as I was expecting either, and you can tailor its tautness via this dash-mounted switch. And refinement? Well, the thundering engine certainly makes its presence felt, but not to the point where you'd be shy to take this car on a cross-continental journey. But that would be a waste of its talents. It's a supercar accessible to almost anyone, yet rewarding enough for the most demanding enthusiast. It's an astonishing achievement. There's nothing subtle about this shape, certainly not Italian, German or American, in every way the definitive Japanese supercar for the Xbox generation. It's an interesting approach given that Nissan started with a clean sheet of paper, for this is the very first GT-R not based on a mass market vehicle. The muscular body structure with its perfect 50-50 weight distribution drapes a body structure variously made up of carbon fibre, aluminium and steel that's slipperier than you might think, the 0.27 CD drag factor matching that of a sleek Toyota Prius. It might not be pretty, but purposeful? Oh yes. Just watch the dawdlers scuttle out of your way. This uncompromising approach continues inside. Instead of trying to copy the Europeans, Nissan has stuck to what it knows, which means heavy use of metal plastic. No fancy design themes, but a maze of apparently haphazard but actually logically placed rectangles, circles and squares, though the contra-rotating speedometer and rev counter dials take a bit of getting used to. You'll need to spend ages with the handbook first. There are no fewer than 11 buttons on the steering wheel alone, but once familiarity dawns, it all works well enough. And the sport seats are brilliant, adjusting amply like the steering wheel for both reach and rake. Build quality is actually very good. The leather's well finished and there are even some switches that look as if they've been lifted from an Audi R8. The rear offers seats that even Nissan admits are best left to kids. Those adults banished to the rear are virtually clamped into place by the rear screen above their heads. Still, there's more space back here than you'd find in a 911. And more boot room too, the 315 litres on offer being nearly 3 times as much. Now, is the best value car Nissan makes a £6,000 Pixo or this £60,000 GT-R? Well, I'd argue for this car, or at least I would if I could afford it. It's difficult to think of another model on the market that's almost half the cost of the cars it competes against. It can't possibly make a meaningful profit for its makers, not only because of the pricing, but because it shares barely a single component with any other Nissan. The Jaguar XKs and Mercedes SLs that are similar money aren't remotely in the same performance league, while the cars that are cost £40,000 more. That's if you want a Porsche 911 Turbo or an Audi R8 V10, or £110,000 more for a Ferrari 458 Italia. Equipment levels include potent alloy wheels, electrically adjustable and heated leather seats, cruise and climate control, and xenon headlamps. Perhaps the highlight is the combined audio and sat-nav setup, offering a hard disk navigation system with 40 gigabytes of memory, accessible via a 7-inch colour touchscreen. Now, this allows full USB and iPod connection either via the screen or steering wheel switches, but it can be even cleverer. Japanese versions of this car use the GPS to disable the speed limiter on racetracks. Potential owners probably won't be too bothered about running costs, which is just as well because they're likely to be sizable. If you average over 20 miles to the gallon on a regular basis, the official quoted figure is 22.8 miles to the gallon, then you probably shouldn't have bought this car in the first place. CO2 emissions, 295 grams per kilometre is the return, and that places this car in, of course, the highest company car tax bracket. Plus you'll need an understanding broker to give you a good quote on Group 20 cover. Tyre wear will probably be high, and specialist servicing will be needed every 6,000 miles. At least there's a 3-year 60,000 mile warranty. It's Depreciation, well, that won't be up to Porsche 911 levels, but it should be pretty good as long as Nissan keeps the number of cars that it imports to exclusive levels and honours the promise that its technical boffins have made of a tamper-proof ECU unit to dissuade aftermarket tuning. You buy a GT-R for what it can do, not for what it represents. And this 478 brake horsepower monster of a supercar does incredible things. Other exotic brands promise this, but require Formula 1 style driving skill to realise the potential on offer. In contrast, this Nissan is accessible to almost all, with an empty road, a racetrack and a petrol-fuelled personality. In short, an exhilarating redefinition of what supercar motoring should be, priced within reach of those who really, really want one. Drive one and you really, really will. Let the badge snobs sneer. Germany has its Porsche 911, the US has its Corvette, but in the GT-R, Japan has its own performance legend.